You're writing a story. Amazing. You're doing a great job at it. You're writing a fantasy story, which is really popular, and there's a great way to incorporate mythology and folklore and religions and different cultures into your story and make it something unique and special and fun to engage into. But then you get stuck. Oh no, magic systems. They're a problem, aren't they? Well, see, here's the thing, they don't have to be. Some are incredible and fun to learn. Some are an absolute chore to go through. And I have a question. Have you ever sat down and been reading a fantasy book and thinking that you really love it, but then they start talking about how the magic system works in the world and none of it makes sense? Well, you're not alone. That happens a lot, actually. And the reason is because they didn't really know how to create the magic system and they didn't know what they were doing. So I'm going to talk to you about how to form a cohesive magic system, just using a few basic things. It's not that hard, actually. And you can incorporate anything that actually already exists. You can incorporate different religions, different mythologies, different histories on magic, because there's thousands of them. Have fun with it. Go and research it. But you can't do it without knowing three things. One, hard magic, middling magic, and soft magic. So here's the thing. Those three that I mentioned, those are the three different types of magic bases that all magic systems are founded on. You're looking at trying to find a way to incorporate those. My advice to you, don't use all three of them. Pick one. But you're probably thinking, what even are these magic system bases and how do I use them? I've never heard of these before, so what do they do? Well, here's the funny thing. You've actually heard these before, but before we get into that, I'm going to explain what these three magic bases are. So here we go. Hard magic bases have very strict and rigid rules that must always be met and followed in order for you to use the magic. So you can't do A and B without getting C. Basically, it's magical equations. Things have a certain reaction depending on what you do. Pretty straightforward, yeah? So here's the thing. That's not all there is to it. Hard magic systems are very rigid, as I said. They have a certain set of rules and guidelines, and they're not used often in fiction writing because they're so hard to write. And you have to follow them, otherwise it breaks the continuity of not only the story, but sometimes the characters themselves. Next is middling magic base. There are rules, but they're a little bit more flexible, and there are some loopholes you can exploit to get through things. So while it is a little bit more strict, it's a lot easier to bend it to fit what you need it to without it seeming silly. So that's actually the one that I use the most, is the middling magic base, because to me, magic should have rules, but it shouldn't have a whole bunch of rules. And then there's the soft magic base. These are loosely defined rules, and so long as someone has the aptitude for it, they can use it. There are no things governing it, and a lot of times this is used in middle grade or kid fictions because it makes it easier for people to grasp onto the magic system when they're young readers. But I do know that there's a lot of older, more teen-oriented or adult-oriented stories that have soft magic systems, but you will find middling magics becoming a lot more common, a lot more mainstream. Now, you may be thinking, but I've never seen these before, so how do I know how this works? Well, actually, you have seen these before, a lot, but you didn't realize it. So I'm going to give you a list. We're going to start with the hard magic. These are the series that you can find them in, and I'm going to be using multiple types of media for this list as well. In hard magic, you can find Avatar: The Last Airbender, Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Final Fantasy video game series, most in particular Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy 15. Then you also find The Witcher, the Supernatural TV show, and the manga and anime series Fullmetal Alchemist. A lot of these are known for their rules, and while sometimes they may look like they're middling or soft magic bases, they're actually hard magic. Because when you get down to it, the magic systems that exist in the world have a very serious set of rules that have to be followed, otherwise bad things happen, and there's always consequences for the reactions of not following those rules. Next, we have middling magic. We have One Piece, Jujutsu Kaisen, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, the Kingdom Hearts video game series, the Inheritance Cycle, and Tulip Bound Hanako-kun. Now, 3 of these are novels that I listed, and most people will know them, but yes, Harry Potter is a middling magic system. There are rules, but they can be kind of bent a little bit. Percy Jackson is the same as is the Kingdom Hearts series. There are rules to the magic, but they're not completely so rigid that you can't break them a little bit. Same with the Inheritance Cycle. And with Tulip Bound Hanako-kun, it is a paranormal manga series, and there are rules that are enlisted by the characters, but there are ways to kind of bend those rules ever so slightly. However, with One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen, it can be a little murky as to how exactly the middling magic base works. But with One Piece, you have things like devil fruits who have classes that fit them. And then you have Jujutsu Kaisen, where the magic is based strictly on what a person's physical limits are, as well as their mental limits and how to control their emotions the best. So that's a really good way to use middling magic, is to incorporate it into the world and not have all these crazy lists of things that can and cannot be done with it. It can kind of do whatever it needs to, but it's only the only limit is literally the person themselves. Soft magic systems. You will find Game of Thrones, Radiant, Sailor Moon, Marvel, and by extension, My Hero Academia, Black Clover, Lord of the Rings, and Inuyasha. Soft magic is really common, like I said, in younger literature, younger fantasy stories. Game of Thrones has a very soft magic system because things are not defined and the magic is not really a major incorporative part in the story. Radiant is actually a manga series written by a French author, and it is very loosely defined magic. There are items and there are some rules, but the rules are so light that it doesn't infringe upon what the magic can do. Sailor Moon is the same. Marvel and My Hero Academia are also like that. Black Clover has elemental-based magic, but the only rule really that exists is that people use books called grimoires, and that's how they structure their magic. In Inuyasha, the magic is more mystic, almost more religious in a way. So there's that, and Lord of the Rings is very much the same. It has a soft magic system. Magic exists, but it's not defined in any certain way or classification. So when it comes to different magic bases, it's kind of like building a house. You have your magic base, and then you have your systems that you build upon it. You can do this different ways. It doesn't really matter 100% about how you want to do it, but a good way to do this is to think about, if you could use magic, how would you use it? With me, I would use magic that is elemental, but I would also have it heavily based on the actions of the person themselves. What are their personalities like? That would define their magic. That's pretty good, yeah? Okay, so here's the next thing. Hard magic is not used that much. As I said, it's because it's so hard to do. Here's the thing. When you're creating a magic system, maybe don't focus so much on what you can't do with it, but what you can first. And then set guidelines about what you feel would be too much for a person to be able to do. If they had the powers of a god, what are their limits? If you look at anything really, if you have godlike power, how do you keep that person in check? If they can do whatever they want, then nothing's a threat to them. There's no story because the characters don't have to go through anything. Or maybe they have this godlike power, but they're afraid to use it because they don't know if they can control it. When you're building your magic system, ask yourself questions. What do you want if you were able to use this magic? If you have all this power, what keeps it in check? What limits it? What causes people to be confronted with it? Is it common or is it uncommon? I think the main thing you have to ask yourself when you're making magic systems is, really, in the end of the day, how do you want this to affect your world? In our world, magic is believed, but it's fantasy, it's fiction, it's mysticism, it's ancient religions that don't exist anymore. So you have to ask yourself, how do you want to be inspired? How do you want to draw off of the things that exist in the world now to create something a little different? Now, you could base it off of mythology, religion, cultures, history, folklore, other fantasies, and grow grow from it. Make it bigger and better than it already is. Make it something different. Make it something unique. When I was writing the Blue Lotus, I took a lot of inspiration from Japanese animation and manga, but I also took a lot of inspiration from Japanese mysticism, shamanism, Shinto, and also from mythology itself to create the basis of the magic system and how it works. I'm not going to go into those kind of details because that's spoilers, and the book's not ready to be released yet. But when you're thinking about your magic system, maybe make sure that you want to be able to do this yourself if you could. If you could write this magic system into our world and actually use it, how would you want to? What would you want to do with it? Where would you want to go? How would you want it to be? You always need to be constantly asking yourself this as you're developing it. And also, don't try to incorporate more than one type of magic system base unless you are making multiple different cultures and races that use different sets of magic. Um, I've actually thought of that idea before. It's basically an idea of different cultures maybe use different magic systems. And if they do, are they soft, middling, or hard magic bases? It's a way to do that, but if you're the first time you're writing is to use a magic system, I'd recommend using middling or soft magic and not trying to use hard magic, mostly because of how difficult it can be, as I've said before. But anyways, I want to talk to you guys about the magic systems. If you have questions, put them in the comments down below, and I will talk to you guys later, all right?